Tessa had her hand buried elbow-deep in a snowbank outside my building at 11:30 on a Wednesday night, looking for her keys and somehow still managing to make it funny. "They're in there," she said. "I can feel them spiritually." "You dropped them in the snow." "I released them into the earth." I was standing behind her with my phone. Flashlight pointed at the ground, which was doing essentially nothing, because the snowbank was 3 feet deep, and the keys had been spiritually released, somewhere near the bottom. It was -14. My ears had stopped feeling like ears about 4 minutes ago, and had started feeling like decorative objects attached to the side of my head. "Tessa, I almost have them." "You do not almost have them." She pulled her arm out. Her sleeve was soaked to the shoulder. She looked at it, then at me, with the expression of someone who had not entirely ruled out moving to a different country. "My apartment has a spare key," I said. "Come up. We'll figure it out tomorrow." She looked at the snowbank like it had made a personal choice. "Fine," she said. "But I want it on record that the snow started this." This was Tessa. 3 years of her in my life, and somehow this felt completely normal. We had met through my coworker Parveen at some birthday thing in a bar in Kensington Market. Back when I was new enough to Toronto that I still got turned around coming out of the subway, I had been sitting at the end of the table not talking to anyone, because I didn't know anyone. And Tessa had appeared in the seat beside me, carrying 2 drinks, set one in front of me, and said, "You look like someone told you the weather was a lie and you're just now believing them." I told her I didn't understand the city yet. She said, "Nobody does. That's the point. You just pretend until it starts being true." That was it. That was how it started. She handed me a drink I hadn't asked for, at a party I hadn't wanted to attend, said something that made no real sense but somehow made total sense. And then we talked until the bar closed and the birthday person had long since gone home. After that, it was coffee on Queen Street, then walks along the lake in October when the wind was doing its absolute worst. Then texts that started with actual questions and became something else entirely. She would send me a photo of a raccoon on her fire escape at 2 in the morning with the caption, "He knows what he did." I would respond. We would somehow end up 40 minutes deep in a conversation about whether raccoons had long-term memory. I never figured out how it happened, it just did. People asked. Sometimes, the way people do when they're watching 2 people orbit each other and waiting for something to happen. My friend Cole asked me once, point blank, over beers at his place in Scarborough, "Are you and Tessa a thing?" "No," I said. "But you want to be." I told him it wasn't like that. He looked at me the way people look at someone who is wrong and has chosen to be wrong on purpose. I didn't bring it up again. The night the snowbank ate her keys started, because her radiator had been making a sound since October that she described as a small man living inside it who is deeply unhappy. Her building super had looked at it twice and done nothing meaningful either time, and by December it had gone from unhappy small man to what I can only describe as unhappy small man banging on pipes. She had started sleeping with earplugs in, which meant she had also started missing alarms, which meant she had been showing up to her shift at St. Mike's slightly frantic twice in the past 2 weeks. And she was a nurse. Not in a TV way, not in a she looked competent and calm in Scrubs way. In a real way, meaning she came home sometimes with a tiredness that sat behind her eyes and didn't leave for a few days. She didn't talk about the hard shifts unless she wanted to, and she never made you feel like you had to ask. She just knew what she needed, which was usually takeout, something bad on TV, and to not be alone in her apartment where the small unhappy radiator man was conducting his nightly symphony. That's why she had been at my place when the keys fell. She had stayed for dinner. We had walked to get bubble tea after because she wanted to walk even though it was the kind of cold that makes your face feel like it's filing a formal complaint. and on the way back, she had tripped on a patch of ice near the snowbank, grabbed my arm, stayed upright, and in the process dropped her keys directly into the snow. I found them the next morning with a flashlight and a stick I found near the recycling bins. Tessa texted me a photo of them when I brought them up. The prodigal keys, they look ashamed. I sent back, they should be. She sent, harsh but fair. This was also Tessa. She slept on my couch that night, and left early, because she had a morning shift. She made coffee before she went because that was another thing that had just happened over 3 years. She knew where I kept the coffee. She knew. My maker ran slow and needed a head start. She knew I took it black, and she took it with oat milk, which I had started keeping in my fridge even though I didn't drink it. I noticed that when I opened the fridge that morning after she left. 1 carton of oat milk. Not mine. I closed the fridge and did not think about it. That was something I had gotten very good at. Christmas came and went. We both stayed in the city. Her family was in Vancouver, and flights were unreasonable. Mine were outside of Halifax, and I'd been home in October for my aunt's 60th. We did a small thing with Parveen and her partner at their place, in the annex on the 23rd, and then, on the 25th, it was just us, because it was just us. We ordered Korean fried chicken from a place on Bloor that was open, because the owner was very practically minded about holidays. And we watched 2 movies, and at some point, Tessa fell asleep on my couch, with her feet tucked under a blanket I owned, but she had claimed, and I sat in the armchair beside her, trying to pay attention to the credits of something, and mostly paying attention to her. I did not think about that either. I was getting better at this in a way that probably should have worried me. New Year's came. We went to a thing in Liberty Village that was too loud and too crowded, and smelled like someone had bought a lot of champagne and then spilled it. By 11 we were outside in the cold because we both needed air. We found a bench that wasn't buried and sat on it and watched the street. Somewhere down the block a group of people were counting down to something that turned out to be 12 minutes early. Wrong time zone, Tessa said. Atlantic Standard. Atlantic Standard. Bold choice. She was wearing a coat she'd borrowed from me in November and never given back. Gray wool, too big on her, sleeves past her hands. This was also a pattern. My things drifted toward her, the way weather drifts toward windows. Naturally, without anyone making a decision. Until suddenly they were just there. We made it to midnight. The real one. The city made its noise. Someone nearby set off something that sounded like it probably wasn't legal inside city limits, and Tessa turned to me and said, "Happy New Year, Callum," in a voice that was softer than the situation required. "Happy New Year," I said. She looked at me for a second. Then she looked away. I told myself it meant nothing. I had a lot of practice at that. February was when things got harder to ignore. Not because anything dramatic happened. There was no single moment I could point to. It was more that something shifted the way ice shifts in late March. You don't see it happen. You just suddenly notice that what was solid isn't anymore. Tessa had a bad run of shifts in the first 2 weeks of the month. The kind where she came off a night and couldn't quite remember how to be a person in regular daylight. She'd text me things like survived or just a photo of her shoes at the door. And I had started leaving my schedule more open than I needed to, not consciously exactly, just open. In case, one Tuesday at 7 in the morning she texted, "I know it's early. Are you awake?" I was already up. I told her yes. She was at my door 20 minutes later with 2 coffees from the Tims on her block and the look of someone who'd been holding themselves together for 6 hours and needed somewhere to set it down. We sat at my kitchen table. She didn't say much. She drank her coffee and looked out the window at the February street, and I didn't ask her to explain anything because she didn't owe me an explanation and she knew I knew that. After a while she said, "I just didn't want to go home yet." "Okay," I said. "You don't have to do anything." "I'm not doing anything." She looked at me across the table, and I looked back at her, and something moved through the air between us that I caught, and then immediately let go of, like a fish I had no business keeping. She stayed for 2 hours. She helped herself to my fridge, which had become a habit. She left when she was ready, not before. That night I sat on my couch and thought about the fish. It was my birthday at the end of February. Toronto in February is not a great time for anything. But I had managed to be born into it anyway, and every year I attempted to make something of it. This year, Tessa made me a cake. I found this out when she showed up at my door at 6:30, with it in a box from the Dollarama on her street, because she hadn't owned a cake box and had improvised. The cake was lemon with cream cheese icing, and it had been frosted by someone who was clearly approaching it emotionally rather than technically. The icing was on top in the general sense of above the cake, but the specifics were open to interpretation. I followed a video, she said. It's great. It looks like it had a hard week. It has character. It looks like something you'd find in a moving box. I took the box from her and set it on the counter and told her it was the best cake I'd been given this year. It's the only cake you've been given this year. Strong contender regardless. Cole and his girlfriend came over. Parveen and her partner. A friend from work named Bridget who was good at games. We ordered pizza because I had not planned well for food. We drank reasonably, and at some point, the cake came out and it was actually very good. Just aesthetically challenged, and everyone made fun of the frosting, and Tessa defended herself competently and lost. By midnight people were gone, and it was just us, which was how it usually ended up. Tessa was washing dishes because she had decided to wash dishes, and I was drying because otherwise they'd sit there until morning. The kitchen was small enough that we kept moving around each other. The music from earlier was still going on low. She handed me a mug to dry. I took it. Did you have a good night? She asked. Yeah. Are you saying that to be polite? No. I meant it. It was good. She smiled at the sink. I watched her smile at the sink and felt something pull in my chest, that I recognized the way you recognize a song you haven't heard in years. Immediately, without needing to hear more than a few notes. She handed me another mug. I dried it and didn't say anything, but I thought about that pull for a long time afterward. March. We were at the ER. At Toronto Western at 1 in the morning, because Tessa had come off a shift, gone home, started making dinner, and put a knife through her palm while cutting butternut squash. She had called me because I was the first name on her phone, and also apparently because, in her words, I needed someone to yell about the squash with. I drove. She held a dishwasher around her hand and narrated the squash situation in some detail while I tried to find parking. The cut wasn't serious. 4 stitches, the nurse told her, and Tessa said, I know, I'm also a nurse. This is embarrassing. And the nurse laughed and said she'd seen worse and left to get supplies. We were in a curtained bay in the waiting area. The lights were the particular shade of fluorescent that makes everyone look like they're being processed. Outside the curtain, someone down the hall was having a disagreement with a vending machine. A TV mounted in the corner was running a home renovation show on mute. Tessa had her hand in her lap. Still wrapped, she was looking at the ceiling with an expression I knew. The one she got when she was tired enough that she'd stopped managing what showed on her face. You don't have to wait, she said. I drove you here. You can leave the car. Tessa. She looked at me. I'm waiting, I said. She looked back at the ceiling. You're very stubborn. You called me at midnight about a squash injury. I panicked. You absolutely did not panic. You gave me a wound assessment on the phone before I even started the car. The corner of her mouth did the thing it does. The tiny lift. The thing that's almost a smile but more private than a smile. Like it's not entirely for public consumption. I had cataloged that expression over 3 years without meaning to and could not have told you when I started. Thank you for coming, she said. You don't need to thank me. I know I don't need to. I want to. The curtain shifted as someone walked past in the hall. The renovation show cut to commercial. Outside, the vending machine argument seemed to have been resolved in someone's favor. Tessa held her wrapped hand against her chest and closed her eyes. My mom asked about you, she said. When? Last week. We were on the phone, and she asked if I was seeing anyone, and I started talking about you, and she said, That's not what I asked, Tessa. I didn't say anything. I told her you were my best friend. What did she say? Tessa opened her eyes and looked at the ceiling again. She said, I know what that means when you talk about him. The IV bag on the stand beside her dripped once, twice. Someone out in the hall called a name that wasn't ours. What does it mean? I said. When you talk about me. She turned her head and looked at me. This was the part where she would normally make a joke. She would say something sideways and funny, and we would both take the exit and end up somewhere safe and familiar. I knew the shape of that move, because we had been making it for 3 years, and I had come to count on it the way you count on weather. Inevitable, not personal. She didn't make the joke. She just looked at me. Callum, she said, you drove to my apartment at 1 in the morning because I cut my hand on a squash. That's not. Last October, when I had that run of shifts, you left your Thursday evenings open for 3 weeks. You didn't tell me. I only know because Parveen mentioned you'd been turning down plans. I didn't answer. You keep oat milk in your fridge. It's for me, she said it simply. Not accusatory, just a fact being named. You started buying it after I stayed over that time in November. I noticed. I didn't say anything because I didn't know how. The curtain moved again with the air from a passing cart. Write in the comments. Was I right to say what I said next? Or should I have let it go, kept the friendship the way it was, and not risked the whole thing? I think, I said, and then stopped, because the honest version of this sentence was going to change something, and I hadn't decided yet whether I was brave enough to let it. Tessa waited. She was good at waiting. I had not noticed that before, or maybe I had noticed and not looked at it. She didn't push. She didn't fill the silence. She just sat there with her hand wrapped in a dish towel and waited for Mia to decide what kind of person I was going to be tonight. I think I've been using the word friend for a long time, I said, because it was the word I could say out loud. She was very still. There's another word, I said. I've just not said it. Tessa looked at me for long enough that I became aware of the renovation show in the background, and the hum of the building and a cart rolling somewhere down the hall, and my own heartbeat being unreasonably loud. Callum. Yeah, I have been hoping you were going to say something like that, she said, for approximately 2 years. I had not expected that. 2 years, I said. Give or take. You didn't say anything. Neither did you. I stopped. That's extremely fair. She let out a breath that had clearly been held for a while. Then she laughed quietly, and it was tired and relieved, and something I did not have a word for that was better than both of those things. We're idiots, she said. We are. 3 years. Almost, exactly. Your oat milk, she said, and then laughed again, softer. I noticed the second week. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to make it mean something if it didn't mean something. And then I couldn't stop thinking about it. It meant something. She looked at me. I know. Now. The nurse came back with the suture kit, and the efficient energy of someone who had seen worse things by 1 a.m. than 2 people finally telling each other the truth. She numbed Tessa's hand and put in 4 stitches, and talked them through aftercare. Instructions, while Tessa nodded. And I sat there how to organize my face into something that looked like a person who had not just had his whole life rearrange itself in a curtained hospital bay. When the nurse left, Tessa looked at her hand and then at me. 4 stitches, she said. I heard. Very professional workmanship. You said that out loud. To the nurse, I meant it as a compliment. She might not have taken it as a compliment. She laughed. Tessa said. We understood each other. I watched her inspect the bandaging with the focused expression she got when she was assessing something. And I thought, I have been watching this face for 3 years. Every version of it. The tired version and the laughing version, and the one she makes when she's lost in thought and doesn't know I can see it. I had watched all of it and called it friendship, because friendship was what I had permission for. Hey, I said. She looked up. I'm glad about the squash. She stared at me. That is, she said, a terrible thing to say. You know what I mean. You're glad I put a knife through my hand. I'm glad we're here. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, very seriously, Callum, that barely saves it. Does it save it? The small private smile came back. Barely. We sat in the bay for another 20 minutes, waiting for discharge paperwork. The renovation show moved on to a kitchen. The vending machine out in the hall had apparently forgiven someone, because it was quiet. Tessa leaned back in the bed with her bandaged hand in her lap, and her head tilted toward me, and we talked about nothing in particular. The show, a podcast she had been listening to, the fact that I still owed Cole $20 from a hockey bet I had lost in November. And the whole time something underneath the conversation felt different. The way a room feels different when the window is open. A change in pressure in air. At 2:30, a different nurse came with paperwork. Tessa signed left-handed because of the stitches, and it looked like a ransom note. She pointed this out. The nurse said she'd seen worse. Everyone had seen worse tonight. We walked out into the cold at nearly 3. The parking lot was mostly empty and the sky had the particular dark of a city at night. Not black, exactly, more a deep orange-gray where the lights bounced off the cloud cover. Everything was quiet. Tessa stopped at the edge of the sidewalk and looked up. It smells like snow, she said. It's March in Toronto. It's always about to snow. That's accurate. She turned and looked at me and her coat. My coat, the gray wool one she had borrowed in November, sat around her shoulders, and the parking lot light caught the side of her face, and I thought, I should have said something years ago. I thought it without anger, just as a simple fact, the way you notice a streetlight has come on. She reached out and took my hand. Not with any announcement. Not as a moment. She just reached out, the way you reach for something that's been there the whole time, and her fingers found mine in the cold. Hi, she said. Hi, I said. 3 years, she said. Almost exactly. She squeezed my hand once, like a period at the end of a sentence. We walked to the car. That was 9 months ago. Mostly, things are the same. This is the part I didn't expect. How much stays. We still get pho from the place on Dundas she likes, because she thinks theirs is better, and she's right. She still steals fries off my plate, and acts put upon when I notice. We still walk along the lake, when the weather allows, and argue about things that don't matter for longer than the things matter. The oat milk is still in my fridge. I still buy it. There's no reason to stop now. Last week we were on my couch on a Sunday, and she had her feet in my lap, and she was reading something on her phone, and I was watching something I wasn't really watching, and she said, without looking up, "You know I'm not giving the coat back." "I know," I said. "It's mine now." I accepted that in November. Of last year. Of last year. She turned a page. Outside, November was doing what November does in this city, which is remind you that it's only going to get worse for several months. The radiator in my building was working fine. There were no unhappy small men inside it. She looked up from her phone and found me already looking at her and didn't look away. "What?" she said. "Nothing. You're doing the face." "I don't have a face." "You absolutely have a face, Callum. You've had it for 3 years. I just didn't know what it meant." I didn't say anything. She put her phone face down and looked at me properly. "I know what it means now," she said. Outside, the first snow of November started to come down, in the small, serious way it does here, not a suggestion but a statement. The city got a little quieter, the way it does when the snow starts to absorb the sound. Her feet were still in my lap. The coat was on the hook by the door, where it had hung long enough to become furniture. There are a lot of words I could have used for Tessa over the past 3 years. I used the safe one for a long time, because the safe one let me keep her close, without risking anything. I don't need the safe word anymore. I know the right one now.